Part 1. The alarm woke Jake Morrison from a deep sleep. He rolled out of his bunk and grabbed his uniform, already knowing something was wrong. Alarms like this only sounded during emergencies. He dressed quickly and ran to the bridge of the Valiant, his boots echoing in the metal corridors. When he arrived, the bridge crew was already at their stations. Lieutenant Sophie Carter turned to look at him, her face pale. "Commander, you need to see this," she said. Jake walked to the main screen and read the message scrolling across it. The words made his blood run cold. It was a distress call, but not from any human colony. This message came from the Galactic Council itself. "This is the Galactic Council emergency broadcast. All civilized species are under existential threat. The Vorax swarm has breached the outer rim. Millions are dying. We require immediate military assistance from any capable species." Jake read it twice to make sure he understood correctly. The Galactic Council was asking for help. The same council that had rejected humanity 3 times when Earth applied for membership. The same aliens who called humans too violent, too dangerous, too primitive for their civilized space. Sophie looked at him with uncertainty in her eyes. "Sir, what do we do?" Jake took a deep breath. He knew what the council thought of humanity. 5 years ago, when Earth finally developed faster than light travel, they had made contact with dozens of alien species. The meeting had not gone well. The council looked at human history and saw only war, violence, and destruction. They saw a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times. They refused to let humanity join their peaceful alliance. "Get me Admiral Karen Hughes at Central Command," Jake ordered. The communication system connected within seconds. Admiral Hughes appeared on the screen. She was a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion 20 years ago and earned every medal the military could give. She looked at Jake and nodded. "I've seen the broadcast, Commander. What's your opinion?" Jake chose his words carefully. "The Valiant is ready to deploy immediately. We can have the entire Third Fleet mobilized within 6 hours. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Her jaw was tight and Jake could see her thinking. Finally, she spoke. "The Council rejected us 3 times, Commander. They said we were dangerous. They said our biology made us unfit for civilized space. They said we were nothing but violent apes who learned to build spaceships." "Yes, ma'am, I know," Jake said. "But civilians are dying out there." Admiral Hughes closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Something in her expression had changed. "You're right. Humanity didn't crawl out of Earth's gravity well to watch innocent people burn. I'm authorizing full fleet mobilization. Commander Morrison, you have operational command. Show them what humans can do when we fight for something that matters." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. "Understood, Admiral. We won't let them down." The connection ended and Jake turned to his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders. These men and women had served with him for 3 years. They trusted him. He would not waste that trust. "Sophie, sound General Quarters. Get every ship in the Third Fleet ready to jump. We leave in 5 hours." The bridge exploded into controlled activity. Officers called out orders, screens filled with data, and the ship came alive around them. Jake walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, people were dying. It didn't matter what species they were or what their government thought of humanity. They needed help, and humans would answer. Lieutenant Ben Parker called out from the tactical station. "Sir, we're receiving more data from the Council. They're sending us everything they have on the Vorax." "Put it on screen," Jake said. Images appeared showing the enemy. The Vorax looked like enormous insects made of crystal and dark metal. Each creature was about the size of a fighter jet. But they didn't travel alone. The images showed millions of them moving through space like a living cloud. They swarmed over ships, tearing through hulls with their sharp mandibles. They covered planets and consumed everything. "They don't communicate," Ben said, reading the data. "They don't negotiate. They just eat." They've destroyed 6 colonies in the past week. The Council estimates they've killed over 50 million beings so far. Sophie looked sick. "How do you fight something like that?" Jake studied the images carefully. He had spent his entire adult life in the military. He had fought pirates, rebels, and once even a rogue AI that tried to take over a mining station. But this was different. This was an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with or scared away. "The same way humans have always fought," he said finally. "We adapt, we endure, and we refuse to lose." Over the next 5 hours, the Third Fleet assembled. 36 warships gathered in formation around the Valiant. There were big carriers, medium cruisers, and small destroyers. Every ship was ready for combat. Every crew member knew they might not come back. Jake stood on the bridge and opened a channel to all ships. His voice would reach every person in the fleet. People of the Third Fleet, this is Commander Morrison. Today we go to fight an enemy we've never faced before. We go to help people who rejected us and called us savages. Some of you might wonder why we should risk our lives for aliens who don't even like us. He paused, letting his words sink in. I'll tell you why. Because it's the right thing to do. Because we're human. And humans don't abandon people who need help. Our species survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and near extinction. We survived because we never gave up. We survived because we protected each other. Today, we extend that protection to beings we've never met. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were nodding ready. The council thinks we're too violent. Maybe they're right. But today, they'll learn that human violence can be a shield instead of a sword. Today, they'll learn what it means when Deathworlders go to war. All ships prepare for hyperspace jump on my mark. He raised his hand and then brought it down sharply. Jump. The stars stretched and twisted as the fleet entered hyperspace. They were going to war, and nothing would ever be the same again. The universe had cried for help, and the Deathworlders were answering that cry. Jake whispered a prayer for his crew, for the aliens they were going to save, and for himself. Then he pushed the fear away and focused on the mission. There would be time for doubt later. Right now, people needed him to be strong. Part 2, the jump through hyperspace made Jake's stomach twist in knots, but he kept his face calm. Around him, the crew focused on their stations. When the Valiant dropped back into normal space, Jake immediately knew they were in trouble. The Andromeda sector looked like a graveyard. Dozens of alien ships floated in space, their hulls torn open and exposed to the vacuum. Bodies drifted among the wreckage. Some were frozen, others had been ripped apart. Debris fields stretched as far as the sensors could reach. In the distance, Jake could see a planet. Its atmosphere glowed orange from massive fires burning on the surface. Dear God, Sophie whispered beside him. Jake forced himself to stay focused. Emotion would not help anyone right now. Tactical, give me a situation report. Ben's hands moved quickly across his console. His face was lit by the blue glow of the screens. Sir, I'm detecting massive biological signatures 2 million kilometers ahead. They're moving toward that civilian station. The main screen changed to show what Ben was seeing. Jake felt his hands grip the armrests of his chair. The Vorax swarm looked worse in person than in the images. They moved through space like a massive cloud of death. Millions of crystalline bodies reflected the light from nearby stars. The swarm flowed like water, but water that could think and kill. Council ships are trying to hold the line, Ben continued, but their weapons aren't doing much damage. Jake watched as beautiful alien vessels fired energy beams at the swarm. The Vorax died by the hundreds, but thousands more surged forward. The alien ships had powerful shields and advanced technology. None of it seemed to matter. The Vorax simply overwhelmed them through sheer numbers. One alien ship exploded as the swarm covered it completely. Jake could imagine the crew inside, fighting desperately as the creatures tore through their hull. He pushed the thought away and focused on what needed to be done. All ships, this is Morrison. Weapons free. Target the densest concentrations and fire at will. The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Unlike the clean energy weapons of the Council, human guns were loud and brutal. Railguns fired solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. Nuclear missiles streaked across space. Point defense cannons created walls of bullets. The effect was immediate and shocking. Railgun rounds punched through dozens of Vorax at once. The kinetic energy tore their bodies apart like paper. Nuclear warheads detonated in brilliant flashes, each one vaporizing hundreds of creatures. The swarm seemed to recoil, as if surprised by the ferocity of the attack. They're changing direction, Ben called out. Estimate 200,000 hostiles inbound on our position. Good, Jake said calmly. Sophie, open a channel to the Council ships. Tell them to fall back and protect the civilians. We'll handle the Vorax. Sophie worked her console and then nodded. A moment later, a new voice came through the speakers. The translator made it sound mechanical, but Jake could hear the stress underneath. Human vessel, this is Commander Veloth of the Council Defense Force. You must retreat. Your primitive weapons cannot hold them. Jake almost smiled. Primitive, they still thought humans were primitive. Commander, humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to fight or die. Watch and learn. The Vorax hit them like a tidal wave. They swarmed over the Valiant's hull, their mandibles scraping against the armor. Automated defense turrets spun and fired, cutting them down by the hundreds. But more kept coming, always more. Jake heard the clang of metal boots in the corridor behind him. Marines in powered armor were running to defensive positions. They would open the airlocks and step outside the ship to fight the creatures with whatever weapons they had. It was insane. It was also necessary. Inside the ship, alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed on Ben's console. Hull breach on Deck 7. Another on Deck 12. The Vorax are getting inside. Jake grabbed the ship-wide intercom. All security teams, repel boarders. Defend every corridor. Through the internal cameras, Jake watched as security officers rushed to meet the Vorax. The creatures poured through the breaches like water through cracks. The humans met them with rifles, grenades, and combat knives. Some officers screamed as they fought, releasing all their fear and anger in those battle cries. On the bridge, everyone stayed focused on their jobs. Sophie coordinated communications with the other ships. Ben managed weapons and shields. The helmsman kept the Valiant moving, presenting the strongest armor to the enemy. They worked together like parts of a machine. "Helm, bring us around," Jake ordered. "I want a broadside on that concentration." "Engineering, reroute all power to weapons." "Sir, that will drop our shields to 20%, Sophie said urgently. Jake shook his head. "Do it. We're not here to play defense." The Valiant turned slowly, presenting all its guns to the thickest part of the swarm. Every weapon fired at once. The combined firepower created a gap in the enemy formation. Thousands of Vorax died in seconds. Other human ships saw what Jake was doing and copied his tactics. They formed a battle line and poured fire into the enemy. The Vorax kept coming. They didn't seem to understand fear or self-preservation. They just attacked relentlessly. But humans were stubborn too. Every time the enemy pushed forward, the human fleet pushed back harder. Jake watched the tactical display, looking for patterns. The Vorax moved in waves, concentrating their attacks on damaged ships. They were coordinated somehow. That meant there was intelligence directing them. If he could find that intelligence, maybe he could kill it. Ben, analyze their movement patterns. See if you can find any anomalies. On it, sir. The battle raged for 2 more hours. The human fleet lost 2 destroyers. The cruiser Liberty took heavy damage and had to fall back. But they held the line. The civilian station remained protected behind them. Finally, slowly, the Vorax began to pull away. It wasn't a retreat. Jake didn't think they could retreat, but their numbers had been reduced enough that they sought easier prey elsewhere. "Ceasefire," Jake ordered. "Damage report." The reports came in from all over the ship. Hull breaches on 6 decks, 30 crew members dead, twice that many injured. The portside railgun was destroyed. 2 missile tubes were jammed. But they had survived. "Incoming transmission from the Council flagship," Sophie said. The screen showed an alien that Jake had never seen before. Commander Veloth was tall and thin with pale blue skin. His large, dark eyes stared at Jake with an expression that seemed to mix wonder with shock. "Commander Morrison, I must admit I did not believe you could hold them. My analysts estimate that without your intervention, the station and all 3 million civilians aboard would have been lost." Jake nodded tiredly. "We're not done yet, Commander. What's the strategic situation?" Veloth's expression became grave. "The swarm has fractured into multiple groups. They're hitting colonies across 17 systems. Our fleets are scattered trying to respond, but we lack the firepower to stop them." "Then we need to change tactics," Jake said. He gestured to Ben, who brought up a map of the sector. "The Vorax move in predictable patterns. They're following food sources. If we can find where they're coming from, we can strike at the source." Veloth looked confused. "You believe they have a central coordination point?" "Everything has a weakness," Jake replied. "We just need to find it." Part 3. Over the next 3 days, Jake barely slept. He spent every waking hour coordinating with the Council forces and planning the next moves. The Valiant remained at the civilian station while repair crews worked around the clock to fix the damage. Jake stood in the medical bay, visiting the wounded. He walked between the beds, stopping to talk with each injured crew member. A young officer named Danny Clark had lost his left arm fighting Vorax in the corridors. He smiled weakly when Jake approached. "Did we win, sir?" Danny asked. Jake put a hand on the young man's shoulder. "We're still fighting, Danny, but you did your part. You saved lives today." "Good," Danny said, closing his eyes. "That's good." Jake left the medical bay feeling the weight of every death, every injury. Command meant responsibility. It meant carrying the burden of every decision, but he couldn't let that weight slow him down. Too many people depended on him staying strong. When he returned to the bridge, Sophie was waiting with news. "Sir, we've been analyzing the battle data." Ben found something interesting. Ben brought up a holographic display showing the movement of the Vorax during the fight. "Watch this, sir." Every time a group of Vorax changed direction, there was a slight delay, like they were receiving orders from somewhere else. Jake leaned forward, studying the display. "How long of a delay?" "About 3 seconds, which means the signal is coming from somewhere relatively close. Maybe a few light hours away. Can you trace it?" Ben shook his head. "Not exactly, but I can narrow down the possible locations. There's a nebula in the outer system. The signal could be originating from there." Jake felt a spark of hope. If they could find the source of the coordination, they might be able to stop the Vorax permanently. "Sophie, set up a meeting with Commander Veloth and his science team. I want to share this information." An hour later, Jake sat in the conference room with Veloth and 3 council scientists. The aliens looked uncomfortable in the human-designed chairs. Veloth spoke first. "Commander Morrison, before we begin, I must address something. The council has been discussing your actions during the battle. Many of us are troubled by your tactics." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Troubled?" One of the scientists, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish, spoke through a translator. "You sacrificed ships. You allowed your crews to die when you could have retreated. By our calculations, you could have reduced casualties by 40% if you had withdrawn and regrouped." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but pushed it down. "And how many civilians would have died if we had retreated?" The scientist didn't answer. Veloth stepped in. "What my colleague is trying to say is that your willingness to accept losses is foreign to us. The Council values every life. We seek to minimize casualties at all times." "So do we," Jake said firmly. "But sometimes you have to risk lives to save lives. If we had retreated, 3 million civilians would be dead. Instead, we lost 2 ships and about 300 crew members. That's a terrible cost, but it's better than the alternative." Veloth was quiet for a moment. "I am beginning to understand why the Council misjudged humanity. We saw your history of warfare and believed you valued life cheaply, but you don't, do you? You simply understand that sometimes sacrifice is necessary." Jake nodded. "Humans come from a world that tried to kill us constantly. We learned early that survival sometimes requires sacrifice. We learned to protect the group even at individual cost." The meeting continued for another hour. Jake shared all the data Ben had collected. The council scientists agreed that the nebula was the most likely location for a Vorax command center. They called it a hive. "If we can destroy this hive, the swarm might lose coordination," Veloth said. "But getting to it will be difficult. The nebula is deep in Vorax territory. We would need to fight through their entire force." Jake studied the star map on the table. The nebula was far away, surrounded by dozens of systems where the Vorax had been sighted. Any fleet trying to reach it would be attacked from all sides. "How many ships can the Council provide?" Jake asked. Veloth looked uncomfortable. "Our fleets are scattered, defending our colonies. We might be able to gather 40 vessels within a week." "Not enough," Jake said. He pulled up a communication link. "Sophie, get me Admiral Hughes." The Admiral appeared on the screen. She looked tired but alert. Jake quickly explained the situation and his plan. When he finished, Hughes was quiet for several seconds. "You're talking about a suicide mission, Commander?" "Yes, ma'am. But if we succeed, we save millions of lives." Hughes drummed her fingers on her desk. "How many ships do you need?" "Everything we have, Admiral. Every ship that can fight." Hughes closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, her expression was hard. "You'll have them. I'm pulling ships from Earth, Mars, the outer colonies. I'll even come myself. If this is going to be humanity's last stand, I want to be there." Jake felt a surge of respect for the old warrior. "Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me yet," Hughes said. "You're asking people to die, Commander. Make sure it means something." Over the next 4 days, human ships arrived from all over known space. They came from Earth, from the Mars orbital docks, from the mining colonies in the asteroid belt. Some were military vessels. Others were converted civilian ships with weapons bolted onto their hulls. Every captain volunteered, knowing the odds. Jake walked through the Valiant's corridors, listening to the crew. Morale was surprisingly good. People were scared, but they believed in the mission. They trusted their commanders. More importantly, They trusted each other. On the 5th day, the fleet assembled at the edge of the system. 72 human warships, the largest concentration of Earth military power ever gathered in one place. Admiral Hughes had transferred her flag to the Defiant, a massive battleship that carried more guns than any other ship in the fleet. Jake stood on the bridge as Hughes addressed all the ships. Her face appeared on every screen. Her voice reached every crew member. People of Earth, today we face an enemy that has consumed entire civilizations. The Galactic Council once called us too violent for their company. Today, we will show them that violence, when used to protect the innocent, is not a sin but a virtue. She paused, letting her words echo across the fleet. We're about to fly into hell itself. Many of us won't come back, but we go anyway. Not for glory or recognition, but because it's right. Our species has survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that nearly destroyed us. We survived because we never gave up. Today we fight for more than ourselves. We fight for every species that cannot fight back. Jake felt pride swelling in his chest. This was humanity at its best. All ships battle speed. Let's go kill a hive. The fleet moved forward as one, accelerating toward the nebula. Behind them, Commander Veloth watched from his ship. The alien commander had asked to observe the assault from a safe distance. He wanted to understand how humans fought when everything was on the line. He was about to learn. Part 4, the fleet plunged into the nebula like a spear thrown into water. The gas clouds glowed with strange colors as the ships passed through. On the Valiant's bridge, Jake watched the sensors carefully. The nebula was dense, making long-range scanning difficult. Contact, Ben called out. Multiple contacts. Thousands of them. The Vorax came from all directions at once. They emerged from the gas clouds like demons from fog. Millions of crystalline bodies reflected the light from the ship's engines. The swarm moved to engulf the human fleet. All weapons fire at will, Jake ordered calmly. The space around the Valiant exploded with light and sound. Railguns hammered out rounds that tore through the enemy. Missiles streaked away, their contrails marking paths through the nebula. Point defense cannons created walls of fire. The Vorax died by the thousands, but thousands more took their place. They swarmed over the ships, covering hulls and trying to tear through armor. The humans fought back with everything they had. Jake gripped his chair as the Valiant shook under repeated impacts. Engineering status report. Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12, the chief engineer replied over the intercom. We've lost the port railgun battery. Reactors at 110%. She won't take much more, sir. She'll hold, Jake said with confidence he didn't entirely feel. She has to. On the tactical display, Jake watched as the fleet pushed deeper into the nebula. They were leaving a trail of debris and dead Vorax behind them. But they were also losing ships. The destroyer Guardian took critical damage and began to fall behind. Her captain, a woman named Lisa Page, came on the emergency channel. Valiant, this is Guardian. We've lost main power. Engines are dead. Jake felt his stomach drop. A ship without power was a coffin. Guardian, evacuate your crew. We'll send rescue shuttles. Negative, Valiant. The swarm is too thick. Your shuttles wouldn't make it. Besides, we've still got weapons and a reactor. Jake understood what she was saying. Captain Page, you don't have to do this. Lisa's voice was steady. Yes, sir, I do. Tell my family I love them. Guardian out. The Guardian's reactor went critical, detonating with the force of a small sun. The blast wave cleared a path through the swarm, allowing the fleet to push forward. Jake said a silent prayer for Lisa and her crew, but there was no time to mourn. The battle continued. More ships took damage. The cruiser Liberty stayed behind with engine failures, her crew buying time for the others. The frigate Courage rammed a particularly dense concentration of Vorax, sacrificing herself to protect the carriers. Through it all, the human fleet pushed forward with stubborn determination. They fought like cornered animals because that's what they were. Humanity had always been best when backed into a corner. After 3 hours of brutal combat, they finally emerged into the heart of the nebula. Jake looked at the main screen and felt his breath catch. The hive was enormous. It looked like a twisted combination of organic matter and crystal. The structure pulsed with a sickly light. Tendrils stretched out for hundreds of kilometers, and Jake could see new Vorax being born from those tendrils. Target acquired, Ben said quietly. All weapons locked. Admiral Hughes's voice came over the fleet channel. She sounded tired but determined. All ships, this is Hughes. Fire everything. The remaining human vessels unleashed their full arsenals. nuclear missiles by the hundreds, railgun slugs traveling at impossible speeds, plasma torpedoes, experimental weapons that had never been tested in combat. Every gun, every launcher, every weapon fired at once. The concentrated firepower struck the hive like the fist of an angry god. The structure shuddered and cracked. Enormous pieces broke away and tumbled into space. The Vorax swarm went wild, their coordinated movements dissolving into chaos. "It's working," Sophie said excitedly. But Ben was shaking his head. "No, wait. The core is still intact, look." Jake watched in horror as the hive began to regenerate. New tissue grew over the damaged areas. The cracks sealed themselves. Within minutes, the damage they had caused was already healing. "It's not enough," Jake said. "Conventional weapons can't kill it." He looked at the tactical display, seeing their remaining ships. 23 vessels left out of 72. So many people already dead. But it couldn't be for nothing. He refused to let their sacrifice be meaningless. An idea formed in his mind. It was desperate and insane, but it might work. Helm full speed ahead. Take us straight at that thing. The helmsman turned to look at him. "Sir? You heard me. All hands, this is the commander." "Brace for impact." Sophie grabbed his arm. "Jake, what are you doing?" "What I have to," he said. "If we can't destroy it from outside, we'll tear it apart from the inside." The Valiant accelerated, driving toward the hive like a missile. On the fleet channel, other captains understood what Jake was doing. Ships began following the Valiant's lead. If conventional weapons couldn't kill the hive, they would use their ships as bombs. The Valiant struck the hive's surface and plunged deep into its biomass. The impact threw everyone on the bridge to the floor. Alarm screamed as organic matter pressed in from all sides. Jake could hear the hull groaning under the pressure. "Reactor breach in 30 seconds, the chief engineer reported. "We can't stop it, sir." Jake pulled himself up and grabbed the intercom. "All hands abandon ship. Get to the escape pods now." "That's an order." The crew rushed to comply, running through corridors as the ship shook and buckled. Jake stayed on the bridge, manually overriding safety protocols. He pushed the reactor beyond its limits, forcing it toward critical mass. Sophie appeared beside him, refusing to leave. "If you're staying, so am I." Jake wanted to order her away, but he knew she wouldn't go. He smiled at her instead. "Figured you'd say that." Through the view screen, he could see other human ships doing the same thing. They buried themselves in the hive's mass, their reactors building toward detonation. "Captain Danny Foster on the Defiant." Lieutenant Kelly Grant on the Justice. Dozens of officers making the same choice. "It's been an honor." "Commander," Sophie said quietly. "The honor was mine, Lieutenant." Jake thought about Earth, about the blue skies and green forests he would never see again. He thought about his family, his friends, everyone he loved. He hoped they would understand why he had to do this. The reactor readings climbed higher and higher. The Valiant's systems began to fail one by one. The lights flickered. The deck tilted sharply to one side. Warning klaxons blared their final alerts. Jake reached out and took Sophie's hand. She squeezed back and they stood together as the reactor reached critical mass. For a brief moment, multiple new stars bloomed in the heart of the nebula. The combined force of 23 ships detonating simultaneously tore the hive apart. The structure exploded, sending massive chunks of debris flying in all directions. The tendrils dissolved. The pulsing light went dark. The Vorax swarm went silent. Without coordination from the hive, the creatures scattered in confusion. They flew in random directions, no longer dangerous as a coordinated force. From a safe distance, Commander Veloth watched in stunned silence. His sensors showed the complete destruction of the hive. They also showed no life signs from any of the ships that had made the final attack. "They did it," one of his officers whispered. "The humans destroyed the hive." Veloth nodded slowly, trying to process what he had witnessed. The humans had sacrificed themselves without hesitation. They had looked at certain death and chosen it willingly to save others. "Record everything," Veloth ordered. "The Council must see this. They must understand what we have witnessed here today." The nebula began to clear, the gas dispersing into space. Where the hive had been, there was now only debris and silence. Part 5 Admiral Karen Hughes floated in her escape pod, watching the debris field through the small viewport. She had survived. Her crew had forced her into an escape pod just before the Defiant made its final run. She had fought them, screaming orders to let her stay, but they had locked the pod and launched it anyway. Now she drifted alone, watching the place where so many good people had died. Her hands were shaking. She had sent those people to their deaths. She had given the order that killed 15,000 human beings. A rescue ship appeared, its lights cutting through the darkness. Council vessels were searching for survivors, pulling escape pods from the wreckage. There weren't many. Most of the crews had stayed with their ships to ensure the reactors detonated properly. The rescue ship brought Karen to a council medical station. Doctors examined her and declared her physically healthy. But she didn't feel healthy. She felt hollow, like someone had carved out her insides and left only an empty shell. Commander Veloth came to visit her in the medical bay. The alien stood awkwardly near her bed, clearly uncomfortable. "Admiral Hughes, I wanted to express my profound admiration for what your people accomplished." Karen looked at him with empty eyes. 15,000 people are dead, Commander. I don't feel like I accomplished anything." Veloth was quiet for a moment. "In our culture, we avoid death at almost any cost. We see the preservation of life as the highest virtue, but watching your fleet today, I realized we may have been wrong. Your people died to save billions. That is not failure. That is heroism beyond anything my species has ever known." Karen closed her eyes. "Tell that to their families." Over the next few days, Karen learned the full scope of what the sacrifice had accomplished. Without the hive, the Vorax swarm was collapsing across the entire sector. The creatures scattered without coordination. Council forces were hunting down the isolated groups and destroying them. Entire colonies that had been under threat were now safe. The death toll from the Vorax attack was staggering. 50 million beings killed before the humans arrived. But the projections had been worse. If the hive had not been destroyed, the Vorax would have consumed hundreds of worlds. Billions would have died. 15,000 human lives had saved billions of alien lives. The math was clear. But math didn't make Karen feel any better about the people she had lost. On the 5th day after the battle, Karen received a message from the Galactic Council. They were requesting her presence at an emergency session. She didn't want to go. She wanted to return to Earth to resign her commission, to find some quiet place where she could forget. But duty called one more time. The council chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. When Karen entered wearing her dress uniform, the entire assembly stood. The gesture shocked her. In council tradition, standing was a sign of deep respect reserved for the greatest heroes. High Chancellor Morven waited at the center podium. The tree-like being spoke in a deep, resonant voice. "Admiral Hughes, the Galactic Council wishes to express its profound gratitude to humanity. Your species saved countless billions of lives at tremendous cost to yourselves." Karen stood at attention, her back straight despite the exhaustion. "We did what was necessary, Chancellor." "Indeed," Morven said. "And that brings us to the purpose of this session. The Council previously denied humanity membership. We believed your aggressive nature made you unfit for civilized space. We were wrong." The Chancellor gestured and a hologram appeared above the chamber floor. It showed the final moments of the battle, ships driving into the hive without hesitation. Karen watched Jake Morrison die again. She watched Danny Foster and Kelly Grant and Lisa Page. She watched all of them make the choice to sacrifice themselves. "We see now that humanity did not become aggressive through malice but through necessity," Morven continued. "Your world shaped you into warriors but also into protectors. You fight not because you love violence but because you refuse to accept defeat. You protect not only your own but those who cannot protect themselves." Morven's voice took on a formal tone. "By unanimous vote of all member species, the Galactic Council hereby extends full membership to humanity, with all rights and privileges thereof." Karen felt tears on her cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them away. Jake would have been happy to hear this. All those people who died would have been proud. "There is more," Morven said. "We request that Earth establish a military academy to teach other species your tactics and strategies. We want to learn how to fight like humans. We want to learn how to be as brave as you." Karen took a deep breath. "Chancellor, I accept on behalf of humanity. But I want one thing understood. We didn't do this for membership or recognition. We did it because it was right." "We know, Admiral," Morven said gently. "That is precisely why you deserve it." Karen left the chamber and returned to her ship. She sat in her quarters and finally allowed herself to grieve. She cried for Jake Morrison and his steady leadership. She cried for Sophie Carter and her dedication. She cried for all the young officers who would never see home again. But she also felt a strange sense of peace. Their deaths had meant something. They had saved billions and changed the galaxy forever. Humanity had proven itself not through conquest but through sacrifice. 3 weeks later, Karen stood on Mars, watching the construction of the new military academy. The building rose from the red desert, a monument to those who had fallen. Above the main entrance, they had carved the names of every person who died at the nebula. Lieutenant Sophie Carter's name was near the top. Karen touched it gently, remembering the young woman who had refused to abandon her commander. Sophie had been 26 years old. She should have had a full life ahead of her. Instead, she had died in the heart of an alien structure, thousands of light years from home. "They'll never be forgotten," a voice said behind her. Karen turned to see Commander Veloth. The alien had requested permission to visit Earth and Mars. He wanted to understand humanity better. "No," Karen agreed. "They won't." "I have been studying human history," Veloth said. "Your wars, your struggles, your near extinctions. I finally understand why you fight the way you do. You learned that survival requires sacrifice. You learned that protecting others is worth dying for." Karen nodded. "Humanity has always been at its best when facing impossible odds. We're stubborn that way." Veloth looked up at the names carved in stone. "The first class of alien cadets arrives next week. They come from 20 different species. They all want to learn from the Deathworlders. Then we'll teach them," Karen said. "We'll teach them everything Jake Morrison and the others died to prove. We'll teach them that strength without compassion is cruelty, but compassion without strength is weakness. We'll teach them to be warriors who fight for others. And perhaps," Veloth said quietly, "they will teach us as well." Karen smiled slightly. "Perhaps they will." She looked out over the Martian landscape, thinking about the future. Humanity had paid a terrible price to earn its place among the stars. But it had been worth it. They had proven that Deathworlders could be heroes. They had shown the galaxy what humans were truly capable of when they fought for something greater than themselves. The universe had cried for help, and humanity had answered. 15,000 people had given their lives to save billions. Their sacrifice would echo through the ages, a reminder that sometimes the only way to win is to risk everything. Karen whispered a final prayer for the fallen. Then she turned and walked toward the academy. There was work to do, and the dead deserved to have their lessons taught to future generations. The story of the Deathworlder fleet would be told across 1,000 worlds. Children would grow up hearing about the humans who sacrificed everything to save strangers, and humanity would never let them forget. Part 6. 3 months had passed since the battle at the nebula. Lieutenant Sophie Carter opened her eyes and looked at the white ceiling above her. She was alive. That fact still surprised her every morning. The last thing she remembered clearly was standing on the Valiant's bridge with Jake Morrison, waiting for the reactor to explode. She remembered taking his hand. She remembered the lights going out. Then nothing. The doctors told her that an escape pod had automatically launched when the ship's systems detected imminent reactor failure. The emergency protocol had kicked in without anyone activating it manually. The pod had thrown her clear just seconds before the detonation. Jake had not been so lucky. Sophie sat up in her hospital bed on Mars. Her body had healed from the injuries, but her mind still carried the weight of survival. Why had she lived when so many others died? Why had the emergency system saved her but not Jake? A nurse entered the room, a kind woman named Patricia. "Good morning, Lieutenant. Admiral Hughes is here to see you." Karen walked in a moment later. The Admiral looked older than Sophie remembered. The weight of command had carved new lines into her face. She smiled when she saw Sophie sitting up. "How are you feeling?" Sophie shrugged. "I'm alive, ma'am. That's more than I deserve." Karen sat down in the chair next to the bed. "Don't say that. You survived because fate wanted you to survive. Don't waste that gift by feeling guilty. Jake is dead, Admiral. Danny Foster is dead. Kelly Grant, Lisa Page, 15,000 others. They died and I lived. How is that fair?" "It's not fair," Karen said bluntly. "War's never fair. But those people didn't die so you could feel guilty. They died so people could live. Honor them by living well." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "What happens now?" "Now you heal," Karen said. "And when you're ready, I have a job for you." A week later, Sophie stood at the entrance of the new military academy. The building gleamed in the Martian sunlight. Above the door, carved in stone, were the names of the fallen. Sophie found Jake's name and traced it with her finger. They should have put your name first, she whispered.
You let us.
You showed us how to be brave. Talking to ghosts? A voice asked behind her. Sophie turned to see a young alien standing there. He was short and covered in golden fur with large eyes. His translator identified him as a member of the krill species. Just remembering someone important, Sophie said. You're Lieutenant Carter, yes? I'm Student Pax. I came from the krill homeworld to learn from humans. Sophie looked at the young alien. He couldn't have been more than the equivalent of 20 human years. Why do you want to learn from us? Pax's expression became serious. Because humans saved my world. The Vorax were 3 days from reaching our planet when your fleet destroyed the hive. My family is alive because of your sacrifice. I want to learn how to protect others the way humans protected us. Sophie felt something shift inside her. This was why they had fought. This was why Jake and the others had died. So people like Pax could have a future. Come on, she said. Let me show you around. Over the next few weeks, more alien students arrived. They came from dozens of species, each with their own reasons for wanting to learn from humanity. Some had lost family to the Vorax. Others simply wanted to understand the warriors who had saved the galaxy. Sophie found herself teaching tactics and strategy to these eager students. She taught them about human military history, about the battles Earth had fought, about the lessons learned through centuries of warfare. But more importantly, she taught them about sacrifice and duty. One day, a student named Iris raised her hand during class. She was tall and elegant with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Teacher Sophie, I have a question. Why do humans accept death so easily? My species tries to avoid casualties at all costs, but humans seem to embrace sacrifice. Sophie thought carefully about her answer. We don't embrace death, Iris. We fear it as much as anyone. But humans learned a long time ago that some things are worth dying for. Our world was harsh. It killed us with disease, predators, natural disasters. We learned that the only way to survive was to protect each other, even if it meant sacrificing ourselves. Another student, a being named Groan, who looked like a walking crystal, spoke up. But don't you value your own lives? Of course we do, Sophie said. But we value something more. We value the idea that the strong protect the weak. We value the idea that one person's sacrifice can save many. Commander Morrison taught me that. He stayed on the Valiant to make sure the reactor would destroy the hive. He died so billions could live. That's what being human means. The classroom was silent. Sophie could see the students processing this information, trying to reconcile it with their own cultural values. Commander Veloth had been sitting in the back of the classroom, observing. He stood now and walked to the front. May I share something with the class, Lieutenant? Sophie nodded and stepped aside. Veloth addressed the students. Before the Vorax attack, the Council believed humans were too violent and aggressive. We thought you were primitive warmongers, but watching the battle at the Nebula changed everything. I saw humans sacrifice themselves without hesitation. I saw them fight not for glory or conquest, but to protect strangers. I realized that we had misunderstood what human aggression truly meant. He paused, looking at each student. Humans are not violent because they love death. They are warriors because their world taught them that survival requires strength. But they are also protectors because their world taught them that individuals must sacrifice for the group. These two traits make them the most effective soldiers in the galaxy. Sophie felt tears threatening but pushed them back. She thought about Jake, about how he would have loved to see this moment. Aliens from across the galaxy learning to fight like humans, learning to protect like humans. After class, Sophie walked to the memorial wall. Every day she came here to visit the names. She had started leaving small stones at the base of the wall, an old Earth tradition. Others had begun doing the same. Now hundreds of stones sat there, each one representing a memory, a thank you, a promise to remember. Admiral Hughes found her there. The older woman stood quietly beside her for a moment before speaking. The Council wants to commission a monument on Earth, something that will remind future generations of what happened here. What kind of monument? Sophie asked. A statue, Karen said, of the Valiant driving into the hive. They want it placed in front of the United Nations building in New York. They want everyone who sees it to remember that humans answered when the universe called for help. Sophie nodded slowly. Jake would have hated that. He never wanted glory. No, Karen agreed. But he wanted people to remember why the sacrifice mattered. A monument does that. Over the following months, Sophie watched as the Academy grew. More students arrived. Human instructors came to teach. The building expanded to accommodate everyone. What had started as a small training program became the premier military academy in the galaxy. Sophie taught class every day, sharing the lessons that Jake Morrison had taught her. She taught students how to think tactically, how to make hard decisions, how to lead when everything seemed hopeless. But most importantly, she taught them that strength without purpose was meaningless. One day, Pax approached her after class. The young Krill looked nervous. "Teacher Sophie, I have been accepted into the Krill Defense Force. I will be leaving the academy next week." Sophie smiled. "That's wonderful, Pax. You've worked hard. You'll be a great officer." Pax hesitated. "I wanted to thank you. When I arrived here, I thought humans were warriors because you were naturally aggressive. But I learned the truth. You are warriors because you choose to protect others. You taught me that real strength comes from knowing what is worth fighting for." Sophie felt pride swelling in her chest. "Remember that lesson, Pax. And remember that the uniform you wear comes with responsibility. You're not just protecting your own people anymore. You're protecting everyone who can't protect themselves." "I will remember," Pax promised. "I will be like Commander Morrison. I will sacrifice if necessary to protect others." After Pax left, Sophie stood at the window looking out over the Martian landscape. In the distance, she could see Earth hanging in the sky, a blue and green marble that had birthed the galaxy's protectors. She thought about Jake and all the others who had died. Their sacrifice had changed everything. The galaxy now understood that humans were not monsters or warmongers. They were protectors who would risk everything for others. The universe had cried for help, and the Deathworlder fleet had answered. 15,000 people had died to save billions. Their names were carved in stone. Their story would be told for generations, and their lesson would echo across the stars forever. Sophie whispered a final goodbye to Jake Morrison. Then she turned and walked back toward the academy. A new class of students was waiting, eager to learn what it meant to be a warrior who fought for others. She would teach them well. She would make sure that the sacrifice of the Valiant and all those other ships meant something. The Deathworlders had saved the galaxy. Now they would teach the galaxy how to save itself. And Sophie Carter would be there, carrying forward the legacy of the man who had taught her what it truly meant to be human.